Hi, this is Joseph.
This is David, and welcome to The Definition.
A podcast where we take a topic and explore various perspectives.
Because not everything is black and white.
Exploring the depths beyond the definition, hearing opinions from the street, as well as offer our own 2 cents. Ultimately, our goal is to spark your intrigue.
Be rest assured, it's always going to be real, relatable, and relaxed. You can also expect us to spice up each episode with a hint of our personal experiences.
Let's get started.
I'm happy with that.
Hi everybody, Joseph, why don't you tell our listeners what we're discussing today?
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to The Definition. Today we've got an exciting topic that borders on the way we exit the earth after our death. Today we are discussing cremation or burial. Do you want to be buried or do you want to be burnt?
Buried or burned? That's our question. And we've been listening to opinions on the street, which we'll share with you as well. But we're going to, as we said in the intro, we're going to bring our own 2 cents as well.
Exactly. And in today's episode, we would like to explore from the point of view of the person himself, but also the impact it has on the loved ones around them that guides that decision. Do you want to be buried 6 feet under? Do you want to be burnt? Understanding also that there are cultural contexts around it. There are different variances across the part of the world. And today is really about exploring, do we spend time in thinking about how we want to exit? Is it our call to make? Is it the call of the families that are related to us? But first, let's go to the streets. Let's hear what the people had to say about burnt or cremated.
All right, so here's our first opinion.
For me, the idea of bugs and worms eating me up slowly, it really grosses me out. I just want to be cremated.
Okay, so the idea of basically becoming the earth and worms and bugs slowly eating away at you. And let's be realistic, maggots and all sorts of stuff, like, you know, you see maggot infested dead animal or something.
Yes.
I mean, that's basically, you know, for all your beauty here on this earth, that's how you end up, is just this maggot infested bit of meat. It does gross me out, actually, when I think about it.
But isn't the saying, from the earth we've come, from the earth we will return, and it's a natural sequence of life, right? You know, at the end of the day, is it really you, or is it just a body?
Yeah, well, look, you're not present anymore in that body unless you have been buried alive, which I know we started talking about before we recorded.
Yes.
Before we hit record, and we both heard of a tale or a story from years and years back where somebody was so afraid of being buried alive that they got a window in their coffin and a window in the top of the grave and a bell on a string which they could pull to notify people. And we laughed at it, but we also acknowledged that actually there have been excavations where people have been excavated and there was scrape marks on the coffin. So this obviously has happened in the past, maybe not in the last 100 years, but back when medicine wasn't as good as it is now, the medical profession, I guess sometimes doctors, did they get it wrong? Bury a living person?
And is it then that last hope of maybe I have one more chance at life, which cremation doesn't give you, but a burial site gives you? Let's take a contrary opinion. From the streets.
Yeah, let's do that.
I want my family to be able to come and visit my gravesite and pay their respects. It just kind of represents my eternal address, and it's a nice thing to carry, family legacy.
Okay. So this person's talking about legacy, about somewhere where the family can come, pay their respects. What do you think about that? What's your thoughts?
Well, I could connect and agree with that from a family culture point of view. Based in Ireland, you would see grave sites that is almost like a Wikipedia, like a dictionary of your lineage. You go to a grave site and you could trace back to your 4th generation, really detailed. I think having that physical spot to go back to as a family, to connect generations before, it makes a good justification for it. What I have seen on the contrary is it's an expensive choice to make.
Yeah, hit me with some numbers. You got some numbers that you pulled out before.
So we did a bit of research, and let's set aside all the extras, the surcharges for a burial in Dublin in Ireland. You've got surcharge for the grave, for the coffin, for digging the hole and all that. But a grave site that holds 3 coffins, depends on what part of the graveyard you're in, ranges between 6 and 10,000 euro.
That's a lot of ice cream for the grandkids.
In a couple of years ago, that was a deposit for a house.
Yeah.
So it is cost inhibiting as an option.
Okay.
And when you think about it, that it only holds 3 graves, that's only one generation apart from you. So parents and maybe one more person. So is it really worth it for 10 grand plus?
I mean, you're asking the wrong person because I'm a stingy man. So is anything worth it? Like milk's not worth it.
Yeah.
Per price per liter. Just pour water on your cereal. But I you know what? I think as well, like times have really changed, right? So in the past, people didn't have memories on their phones of people.
Yes.
And so they'd go and they'd visit the gravesite. I think now, if you want to remember a person, you'll go through an album that you had with them. And I think that's really changed.
You make a very good point about how do we immortalize, how do we keep the memory of our dead alive. You're correct. Historically, before the advent of technology, the grave site with maybe a picture and some few words were the only reference for that eternal memory. But now technology has changed that. You could pretty much do a collage of the person over the last 10 years and keep it on a device. However, just for the listening pleasure of my family, I'd rather be memorized in your heart and not on your phone. Just saying for my kids, So
this is a really strong point, and it's funny because like I think of my granny. My granny, her husband died relatively young.
Yeah.
And we'd go visit her in the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia. It was Czech Republic actually. And her daily routine, which she would bring us on, is visiting the grave, lighting a candle, going to the shops, getting food, going home. Yeah. I found that I didn't realize, I didn't think it was not normal when I was a kid. But looking back now as an adult, I'm like, that's very obsessive. That's not okay.
Yeah.
On the flip side, look, my father died when I was 4, and he's buried literally 2 or 3 kilometers from here. So not prohibitive to visit his gravesite. I only go like once every 2 or 3 years, which some people might think, Dave, you're such a cold-hearted guy for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really depends, I think.
Yeah.
Are you like, is that important to you in the family context to go visit every week or every day? Or are you like, well, look, it doesn't do any, the ritual of visiting a gravesite doesn't do anything
for you. I think your grandma has codified that visit into her DNA. And let's not take it away. They could have had a great relationship, so close enough that is the way she wants to keep the memory alive. Who are we to say it's excessive? Who are we to say, there's the other point that says, are you really living? Are you holding on to a memory of someone who is dead? Is that what the person wants? The pendulum swings both ways. Yeah. My story, my dad died when I was 3 in an auto accident with 9 other young men, and they were all burnt to ashes. The only reason where we could think about where he sat was a ring he always wore that survived the ashes and was sitting on a bit of ash. Dave, we pretty much just packed up the ash, well, my mom and my uncles did, put it in a coffin, and still went about going about the ritual of burying 6 feet down. So the body wasn't even there.
Wow.
So it was a double hit combo. He was burnt, and yet the ashes was put in a coffin, and culturally we still had to go through the whole funeral of burying him. I was too young then, but this topic brings it back to life to say which is and right or wrong, or does it really matter in the grand scheme of things?
So you mentioned culturally, so you grew up in a Christian African context.
Yes. So
why is burial in your historical context when you were a kid? Why is that important?
Well, you see, to an African, land is where we own. Land is where we return. So land is where families are apportioned against the names of their land. It's not necessarily buying a gravesite. The concept of a commercial graveyard is a concept of the big cities.
Okay.
But typically, even when you die in the big city, the body is taken back home to your ancestral family land, and you are buried on the land. So that's why in my case, even though there was no body to bury, they still had to go through the ceremony of putting it in the ground. Right. And just for context, Nigeria is a vast area of land. So finding family lands for you to bury would typically be the land that your parents or parents before farmed on that is known to your name, and people can refer to the site. However, I do not think in our culture there was the part of going back to the gravesite every year to remember them. I do not remember anyone doing that in my family or extended family. It was just he is buried on the land.
Right.
Before now, I then did a research in Japan. Japan has 99.97% cremation.
Wow. Very, very different compared to maybe what we would consider the norm here.
Yes. And you could find answers to that. It's a small landmass.
Yeah.
It's also embedded in their cultural way of life.
Yeah.
Sometimes religion also plays a role. So the UAE, in contrast, only has 1.25% of its dead cremated. A very low rate because, again, culturally and by religious beliefs, the Muslim does not believe in cremating their dead.
Okay. So likelihood is a big driving force in the decision of people's preferences based on their kind of spiritual, religious kind of heritage upbringing.
And lastly, the economic consideration.
Yeah.
The economic consideration of those who are left behind as to what burden they want to carry. I think there's a third opinion from the streets that we also heard that brings this to life.
I personally don't mind. Whatever my family choose to do with my body when I die, it's up to them.
So this is an interesting opinion. This is outsourcing that decision away from the dead to the living. Right. It is saying, let my family decide what is best for them economically, culturally, or spiritually, what they want to do with the burden. We find that as a middle ground of the both opinions that we've seen, where it is all dependent on what the living wants. And that's a very interesting point. What do you think?
Yeah, so I was having... I think there's two types of people in the world. There's those that kind of pre-plan all this stuff for themselves, those that don't think about it at all. There's probably no one in the middle. And my mother's one of those people who, even though she's got another 20 or 40 years left in her life, she's probably going to outlive me, to be honest. She's got it all nailed and pre-planned. And I was like, listen, don't worry about it, you know. But... So we were joking because she was kind of talking about being cremated, and she was like, oh, some families just put you in a pot and put you on your fireplace or mantelpiece. It's like, listen, there's no way I'm like letting you stay here rent free on my mantelpiece after you die.
You have to pay.
So it's like, as much as I want to honor my mom's wishes, she didn't feel strongly about it, but the idea of like having a cremated jar in your house, I don't get grossed out by a lot of things, but that to me is not something I want to do.
It's a forever presence in the house on the mantelpiece, and it makes you uncomfortable. But technology can help with that. I did a bit of research, and I found that the ashes could be converted to jewelry.
Yes.
And could be shared amongst the kids.
That's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And now that's a strong memorial. You want to put it on you as a ring or a necklace. Right. You could also still bury the ashes. Right. Now, from a real estate point of view, that's significantly cheaper because you don't need a 6x2. Right. It's a small cremation jar and you could bury. And I think in Southern America, this is a popular way to cremate and still have a memorial to return to. It's not as expensive as burying an entire body, but it still fulfills that thing of somewhere to keep them physically to return back into.
I think that's actually nice. I like that. It's kind of hybrid. You get cremated, but you still have a site with a little kind of shrine or whatever you want to call it.
Just a curveball around being cremated, right? I'm one of those that I'm undecided, but I think maybe it's the trauma of my dad dying in an auto accident where he was, without his permission, cremated due to the circumstances. And then the whole thing about hell and the scripture about burning in hell forever. It like the way maggots gross you out. For me, it also freaks me out in a bit to say, in fire, being burnt, that's how my dad exited. So I think we have to make room for people's reality, which is a very wide spectrum of concern. I do like the last point that said, let the living decide what they want to do with the dead.
Because ultimately, it affects them more than you.
Yes.
So I think that's a healthy stance. I might take that with my kids to be like, you know what? You decide. I'm fine with whatever. I won't be here. I won't be paying for it. You know, you guys do whatever is best for you, whatever your convictions are. And so ultimately, in that vein, it becomes more of the decision of the family than of the deceased.
Yeah. And that's maybe a middle balance, but I understand that even that suggestion has its own cultural nuances. There might be, do you want to also put it in the hands of the family where that might be contrary opinions from 2 or 3 family members? And at
the first fight post-death.
Yes. And in the time of grieving, that's not one thing you want people to be tussling about what decision to make. It's one less thing to worry about.
Is there merit then to kind of go, do you know what? That should be a family conversation while the person's alive.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't often maybe spend time on that.
Yeah.
But just kind of like sit down as a family unit.
Yeah.
Are my kids too young? They're 8 and 11. I'm 42. Should I schedule it for tomorrow or wait a couple of years?
Well, I've got a 9-year-old who's got great memories when she sleeps, and I don't want to upset her dreams, so I probably will wait on that. But you make a good point. In the broader topic, in my culture, it's uncomfortable to sit down and talk about death amongst the living, particularly the possible death of one of those in the room that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is the reason why many Africans don't have a will.
Right.
You know, just digressing. Some people put this in a will to say, this is how I want to exit as part of my final will. But we don't like talking about death while we're busy living in my culture.
Again, a side point, but one that I want to make. I often think about my death, not because I'm a very pessimistic, depressed guy.
Yeah.
I actually think it motivates you in life to recognize that your time here is limited. So sometimes we live like we are living for eternity on this earth forever.
Yeah.
And actually when we kind of calculate roughly and say, listen, I'm at a certain age, I probably have ballpark, if I'm working on averages, I have this amount of time left. It really helps me to focus. Personally.
And Dave, you make a good point. So ladies and gentlemen, maybe Dave has just ushered us into the next topic, dead or alive, because not everything is black and white. But that's a really good point that we should explore. What does it mean to prepare for death while living, and how does that reality shock us in making certain decisions? Really, really interesting.
Yeah, let's listen. Let's have a text opinion. I'm personally concerned about the burden on my family based on the choice of burial or cremation. I wouldn't want to add extra burden to my loved ones who are grieving. So the cheaper, the better.
I could almost swear that came from a friend of David. I think that's a good point. You know, the family is already grieving. It's a time of pain that you've exited, or the person has exited, and then trying to make it as easy as possible is really a humane consideration from the person who sent that in. Kudos to him.
Yeah. Let's read out another one. It's just easier from a logistics and cost perspective to be cremated. No need for massive graveyards in our communities. Burn me and scatter me somewhere nice and scenic. I think there's some legislation around the fact that you can't scatter ashes wherever you want. Am I right in that?
I probably, in some countries, yes, but this culture is also very hippie culture. You know, it's the free spirit. It's the guys who don't want to be confined to a space, and they say, scatter my ashes. Some might choose a location that is memorable to them and to scatter the ashes there. In the view of a real estate cost, that's really cheap, because land is for the living. Let's build homes, farmland, industries for the living to live on, and not occupy that with the size of a graveyard. But in our cityscapes, graveyards are also part of the element of that what makes a city. You know, some say when you walk through a graveyard, it's like writing and reading a historical books of those who lived before you. Particularly those graveyards where some stones will contain how the person died.
Right. And actually, you make a really good point. Like, if you think of somewhere like Newgrange, which is just half an hour away from here,
yes,
we have this historic mass, this building, this incredible historical site,
yes,
which was based around burial.
Burials,
so
yes.
Burial is just, it's the most primitive part of our life, you know, birth, life, and burial. It's so integral. It always has been.
Yeah.
And it's somehow nice to kind of have that as a part of our existence. I mean, it's a necessary part of existence. So like, we shouldn't avoid it or try to conceal it, I think.
So you make a good point that around the world, in old cultures, we've seen where burial sites have become from just a burial to a historic significance and part of the historical architecture of the country. But also remember, also around the world, I think, is the Mayans. They also have cremation sites that are also part of the historical landscape, where a man of high caliber is also set on a platform and set alight and is burnt to his ashes. So in the context of either or, it still plays into our conscious memory of how it used to be done in the past.
Right.
And in the West, it could be burial. Some other part of the world, it could be cremation. But it's always been there. These two options have always been in the history of mankind of how to go.
You know, Joseph, coming back to the idea of scattering someone's ashes in some public place, whether it's some Vista Point or whatever,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I've seen some disastrous videos online where, yeah, you know where this is going already.
Yeah.
It's a windy day.
Yeah.
I turn up at this Vista Point where my dear mother, let's say,
Yeah.
used to love coming.
Yeah.
And I scatter those ashes, and the wind blows it into the faces of the
people.
40 people standing there. I mean, there's got to be like, I mean, imagine being the bystander and having your face and your mouth covered in somebody's body's ash. Like that. That's not okay.
It is like you have to take a piece of mama. Take a piece of your mom with you.
It's like, yeah, we just got connected on a very personal level, and it's not okay.
It's in your hair, it's in your ear. You really have to go scrub. Look, accidents like that happen. We've also seen at burial sites where the coffin is being lowered and someone slips
Yeah.
and falls into the coffin with
stop.
it, you know.
No, this
and
is
some
not-
say that's a really bad omen, you know.
Right.
It's interesting. Look, I think we've done a good overview around the topic of buried or cremated. As we say, it is neither black or white on our podcast. We are just trying to open the topic up, and hopefully that it stirs up a conversation amongst your friends, your family, your loved one, and hopefully that you might be able to come to the right choice that is suits for you culturally, economically, or financially, depending on where you are. But Dave, I think it's time we bring the curtains down on this topic.
So before we finish, we want to give you our topic for next time, because we want you to get in touch. We want you to send your voice notes, your opinions, send us a WhatsApp message. What do you think? We're going to be speaking about sleepovers.
And in the context of sleepovers, we want to hear, because it could be changed generationally, this world versus the time in past. It's about allowing your kids spend the night in the home that is not yours. It could be relatives, it could be their friends, it could be at a stayover party. If you've got any experience about your time as a young kid at sleepovers, or you have a family opinion, or you guys have certain rules, we would like to hear that. Our social media handles, you can reach out to us, any of those platforms possible, and we'd like to bring your opinion onto our podcast. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Dave, any last words?
Looking forward to the next one.
See you guys on the next one. Bye.
See ya.